So let's pray as we start this evening. Lord God, help us to recollect, rethink, and be renewed this evening. Encourage us to see your works, to hear your words, and embrace your mystery. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so by way of summary for the context for this evening, the notes that I have, I actually thought it was quite astounding because I hadn't really thought about it in this way. Between 1050 and March 2020, worship as a whole in the UK has only been stopped twice. For the Black Death and a couple of points during World War II, when the bombing was so intense that it wasn't considered to be safe. Obviously, there will have been other times when individual churches will have been stopped for fires, plagues, floods, that's kind of a given, but worship as a whole across the UK. So for that reason, if for no other reason, COVID-19 will go down in history because of, the churches being made to close. And I think just reading that paragraph on my notes, it really made me kind of sit there and go, yeah, in 1,000 years, corporate worship has only been stopped officially twice, which is quite up prior to COVID, which is quite extraordinary. And quite obviously, online worship has carried on with a vast majority of parishes going online, which have had both its positives and also its challenges. But at the same time, it's still, as I'm sure all of us know, represented a monumental change in how we worship, in how we meet or don't meet, and just how we enact our faith in the history of the nation. It's also been quite stark to see the difference in opinions over it, because there has certainly been the one side who have supported having the closure of all public buildings, which has included churches, just because of safety issues, and has said, if the technology is available, there's no reason we shouldn't worship online. Let's be safe, let's do it right. Where there have been the other side who have said, no, it's not appropriate to close places of worship because that then is infringing on people's faith, never mind the acts of charity that so many churches do, from feeding the poor and all that kind of thing. And it's been a real argument in the press, certainly an argument on Twitter. And I do know from my participation in various groups about the issue of shielding and whether or not churches should be closed as a result of that. I know the bishops have come under intense pressure from both sides, from the side who believe that the buildings should be closed for safety, and from the other side who believe that the government shouldn't be interfering and shouldn't be overriding it. And I think regardless of whether they made the right decisions or the wrong decisions, I don't envy them what they've had to do over the last few months, because they've been embattled. But one of the narratives that has been part of this, I think, in this critique of the church, as in the church is an institution, the church is a building, the church is whether the buildings are open or closed. Underneath that, I think there's also been an awful lot of questions about God and about faith, of certainly people who don't have a faith saying to those of us who do, how can you believe in this? How can you believe in this sort of thing when we're faced with what's going on in our nation right now? How can you not dismiss it and say that it's just a load of nonsense? Or those who might be able to believe in God but have doubts or fears, to say, well, if God really is who you say God is, then what's he up to? Why doesn't he step in? Why doesn't he stop it? In some ways, you could argue that it's better to be talked about in any way than not at all. But at the same point, it's also created a lot of controversy and a lot of pressure on all sides. But ultimately, I think the thing it comes down to is that over the last year, as Christians, we've been challenged in our faith, challenged in what worship means, what worship looks like, challenged in what it looks like for us, in what we believe, what we don't. And it's on that basis that we're carrying on with some of the conversations that we had last week about Christ's temptation in the wilderness, when we were just talking about him being led or driven into the wilderness, to this time to actually look at the biblical accounts of Christ's encounter with Satan and the specific temptations, which, to refresh your memory, although I'm sure you're familiar with these, were, if you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread, when Jesus was hungry. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down off the high mountain and trust that God and all of his angels will catch you. And then showing Jesus all of the wealth and riches of the world and saying, I'll give all of this to you if you will only bow down and worship me. These are questions that Christ was able to answer through his knowledge of the scriptures. Don't put the Lord your God to the test, this kind of stuff. But some of the questions that we ask aren't necessarily so easily answered. So questions like, specific to the pandemic, why is this happening? Why are some people suffering more than others? And if God is truly a God of justice, then why does the world continue to be so unjust to
Hello, Shirley.
people? Hello, Michael. Welcome.
Hello, sorry we're late.
Quite
I've been
all right.
working.
Quite all right. Don't worry about it. You're welcome now. So, I thought that at this point, having sort of set the stage, if you like.
Are you coming?
Might just mute them in the background while they have a little conversation. I thought what I would start with next is to, I guess, ask each one of you guys how you're feeling specifically in relation to faith and to God and that kind of thing as a result of the experiences we've had over these last months. Potentially, if you're willing to share them, and only if, what some of your questions to God may have been as a result of this time. And equally, in turn, if you brought anything, what it is that has given you strength to carry on over these last few months. So, is there anyone who wants to share what you might think about that? Questions you may have of God over these experiences and things that may have given you strength?
I think I found it hard to motivate myself. And to, I don't know, to devote myself to, reading the Bible or saying my prayers and things like that. It really was difficult. Mm-hmm. But then there were answered prayers as well, which when you get answered prayers, you kind of think, yeah, he's still there. Do you know what I mean? He's still,
yep.
He's still looking after me, even though I'm not quite communicating in the same way as I would normally be. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I do. Yep.
And I suppose my strength and my inspiration is a bit like what Julie and Michael were saying last week, because I've got my shoe, but it's not my walking shoe, but I just couldn't be bothered going downstairs for my walking shoes. But it's just walking. And I'm so thankful that within 10 minutes of where I live, I can be in absolutely wonderful countryside. Mm. And when I got onto the top of the hill, just above Lascelles Hall, there is a 360-degree view right across Huddersfield. And it's absolutely amazing, especially on a sunny day. And you can see for miles and miles and miles. I can see Marsden Moor in one direction, and I can see over towards Dewsbury Ravensthorpe area in the other direction, and it just, and you kind of think, wow, yeah, this is where I feel close to him. Do you know what I mean? It's on that walk, and the thing is that it does give you strength, because I found if I couldn't get out, I were like, somebody with I don't know, an angry person, not really, it did get to me if I couldn't get out and go for a walk.
Yep.
So when I had my funny leg and I couldn't go out, it was an awful week, that one.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Anyone else?
I think it's been more of asking for things rather than anything else, sort of praying to give people things and asking for people to be safe, and it's been that way around, really. I think a bit of a one-way thing, really, saying, help this and help this, and could you do this, rather than the other way around. And yes, we have had prayers answered, but I know sometimes perhaps we've asked for too much through all this. It's my feelings.
What do you think counts as too much?
Well, probably not saying enough thank yous, but just almost being demanding of things.
Is there anything in particular that's brought you strength over these months, Shirley?
I suppose the fact that I've got Michael here, I think it's helped to cope. And being able to get outside, as we've said before, that's really been important. But I think the fact that I've got someone in the house with me all the time, I don't think I would have coped as well.
You didn't this afternoon.
I would have coped as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Shirley. Anyone else?
I'll go next then. Talking of Marsden Mojan, this is what I brought.
Oh, yes.
So that's the photograph I took when I was out walking. And I think for most people, this has been the hardest lockdown because it's been dark nights.
The weather
hasn't been very good. Although I don't mind any weather. I struggle a bit with rain because I wear glasses. So all you that wear glasses will know you can't see where you're going when it's raining. But I've been all over the place, and like Jan, that's all natural, most of that up there. That's God's creation up there. And I do feel thankful and appreciative and admire the beauty. But then I flip the coin and I'll post these photographs, and there's so many people for one reason or another that say, thank you for showing me these photographs. I can't do that anymore. Thank you for showing me that photographs. I've not lived there for that, for a while, for various reasons that really want to see them. And for me, so that's like, yes, I'm happy with it, but so are some other people as well, because they're saying, thank you for showing me these pictures, which is really nice. And then I'm fortunate that as well, although church is not open, I work in a Catholic school, as you all know. We have prayers numerous times throughout the day. We have 15-minute prayers in the morning. I quite often lead those prayers. And I just happen to work with the head of RE as well. So between us, we're getting through. We're talking to each other. And I think that's helping as well. So I don't feel as if I'm missing out as much as maybe what some other people are in that respect. I still miss church, though. I have to be honest. Miss the Sunday morning and the fellowship that we have and we share, because we've all known each other for that long. That's just special. I can't think of any other word for it. That's just special to be there in that building, worshipping together. So that is still sorely missed, but I don't feel as deprived maybe as some people are of that sense of being able to pray and look at Bible passages and things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for what it's worth, I love seeing your photos too, because as a newbie to the area, it's a bit like, wow, all of this is on my doorstep.
Maybe one day, I know various people have said, "Oh, I don't know that walk. You'll have to show me where that is," and other people, other friends that I've got as well. And it's all places in Huddersfield. I don't think I've crossed the border once. Oh, maybe once, just slightly.
Yeah.
But while I were on foot, not in cars. So yeah, it's all Huddersfield because we're not supposed to go anywhere else, are we? So.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Julie. Michael or Faith, either one of you want to say anything?
Something worried me, what you said last week at the Synod meeting about the church going towards being online. I found that disturbing.
Okay. Why is that?
Because I feel that we ought to get back to what we were. And you did state that more people were sort of logging into the services. That's fine. But I want to see those people at church. I want to go back to what we were. I wouldn't like to see our church services going online. And I just feel that it's slipping away that way. And that does worry me a lot.
So on that basis, let me clarify then. When I made that comment, what I meant wasn't about ordinary Sunday morning church services. What I was concerned about was when folk were talking about potentially having evening services that we could share across the deanery and rotating and that kind of thing. It was that sort of thing that I was suggesting potentially using the resource of online, simply because my experience in the past is that things like joint deanery services or joint town services or village services, that kind of thing, they have a brilliant attendance for the first 2-3 times. And then after that, folk don't want to go out in the evening, or it's dark or it's cold, and so they just sort of dribble and die away. And what I was intending in that wasn't about long-term Sunday morning service, our usual worship service being online.
Oh no, that didn't come over really.
But that possibility that if we did look at doing some deanery services, that we look at both things, not necessarily just online, but equally not necessarily just in person. Because one of the things that I do think has been very important about the online option is including people who actually can't get out to a building, of whom we have a few in our own congregations, for example, Joanne, and others like her who, by reason of ill health or disability or what have you, if they can't get out to a Sunday morning service, then they've missed worship that week. Whereas if there's a joint option of one in the building and one online, then they can still participate.
Yeah, I can see your point of view. But there again, being online is exclusivity, isn't it? There's some people who haven't got a computer and are not computer literate. And those are the ones I worry about. Are we missing out those people? And they probably can't get to church anyway. Yeah. If they haven't got a computer, they'd lose on both scores.
Yeah, I think that's the scenario, definitely, if you pursue one option over the other. And I think that's where I would like to see, I think the term that's been bandied around in recent years is mixed economy, in the sense that I very much want to be back in the buildings when it's safe to do so, very much, because I miss it too. I just wouldn't necessarily want to go back to only being in the building, because I think there are some things about being online that have been gifts to many, and I'd just like to explore the possibilities for doing both. But certainly it's not meant to be online only. That wasn't where I was going with that.
No, I that didn't come over, but it just worried me just a little bit, and I just wanted it clarifying, and that's fine. I can accept that.
Yeah. By all means, thank you for asking. Is there anything that you wanted to say, Faith?
I think I find it strange in a sense because in some ways I enjoyed lockdown. Not so much this winter time one because Darren's back at work, Jodie's at work, I'm back on my own. But the first lockdown, Ryan moved in, Jodie's partner moved in, Darren was at home, they were at home, we could sit in the garden, we played games. It was just a lovely time. The only downside was I couldn't see Sophie and Mariah and the twins, so that were really hard. But as far as a household, it was nice because I've already had a number of years where the things that I enjoy doing had been taken away from me. So it's hard when you've had that and you're on your own. You do get used to it, but then somehow you realise, actually, I don't particularly like being on my own. I've just had to get used to it. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But then on the other hand, I haven't liked it in the sense that you feel that I felt vulnerable, and I don't like feeling vulnerable. So that was another thing. I've kind of enjoyed dipping into various online things. I've enjoyed that because obviously you can watch when you want. Could watch a Sunday service on a Wednesday and other people's services, and I've enjoyed that side because there's been a lot more resources. And even if I felt rubbish, I can lay on bed and still get something from something. Do you know what I mean? So that, in a sense, is where the online comes in, as well as in a building for people such as who have got disabilities or can't get out for whatever reason. There's that choice. It's having that choice. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's just a strange time. It's just been strange because I think my emotions have been all over the place. One minute I've been really happy, the next I've been emotional mess. I can't watch out on telly without bursting into tears. I just cry at everything. But I'm really pathetic. I cry at anything. I cry at it. And I'm just tired and emotional. So don't look at me too much because
if you start weeping midway through the course tonight, I won't hold it personally.
Yeah.
But you've had on top of that, you've had a lot of other things going along with your house as well, which doesn't help, does it?
No, it doesn't help. And I'm finding that a bit overwhelming. Boxes everywhere, and
you can't get on with your life.
No, and just the clutter is driving me insane. I can't.
Yeah.
But yeah.
7 years ago today, Faith. 7 years ago today since I stopped being your next door neighbour.
I know, that's gone quick, that.
And it? Quick.
Yeah.
The thing, in perhaps a bit of an irony, that has over these last few months brought me strength is that. Simply because, other side of my phone. And the reason I say that is that even though for many, mobile phones are kind of the bane of your life because they're always there and they're always chiming and they're always interfering no matter what you're doing. For me, it's been a lifeline for being able to keep in touch with people, particularly through shielding, and being able to know that whether it's 40 different ways from WhatsApp to Messenger to texts to emails to whatever, that even if I can't see people personally, I can still reach out with a message. And I can honestly say that if this lockdown and if this situation had happened 30 years ago, when mobile phones just weren't a thing, I definitely would have found it far, far harder because it would have been far more isolating for me in the circumstances that I'm in, both with shielding and also being on my own with Adam. And in that sense, I'm grateful for the technology. And even though there are definite disadvantages to online work, because I miss seeing all of you guys in person as well, it's not the same. I also appreciate some of the benefits in the sense of, as you say, faith. I mean, not my own, but other people's. That if I feel like watching a worship service on Tuesday evening at 10 o'clock, I can. Where in normal times, there might be some American televangelist somewhere, but there wouldn't be, I couldn't just tune into a parish somewhere. And I've really enjoyed and appreciated some of those changes, even though I do miss being in person. I do miss being in the buildings, and I do miss seeing all of you guys face to face. But I think to use the old phrase that I certainly knew growing up, I don't know if it's one that's familiar to you guys, it probably is, not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That, as much as meeting in the building and meeting people face to face is good, and I've missed it, I've also really valued technology and everything that it's helped me, brought to me in these last months that I wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. So yeah, I'm grateful for it.
When we first joined, I don't know whether I heard you right, or you were saying about what did people think about the pandemic? Why had God allowed this to happen, and why people are dying? Did I get that right? I was just that was when I was getting Shirley to come through.
Yeah. So some of the questions just in my introduction and summary that I won't go through it all again, but basically to say that in history, there's only twice in history that worship as a whole in the UK has been suspended. Once was during the Black Death 1,000 years ago. And the other time was at various points in World War II because of the blackouts and it just not being safe. And certainly many individual parishes have had to shut for various reasons over the years, but worship as a whole. So in that sense, if absolutely nothing else, this pandemic goes down in history. And
what about 1919?
Yeah. Well, yes, as part
of the Spanish flu of 1919, which according killed 50 million people. Now, what happened to worship service in those? Because this pandemic is nothing new, and it'll happen again. It's not God's fault. It's just God doesn't interfere with nature.
But I think the thing that I was saying is that in this time with worship in a building sense being suspended, there have largely been two camps, in the sense that there have been some on one side who have felt that it was completely unnecessary and it just didn't need to happen, and that there was very good reason for the churches to stay open, and have wanted to pressure those in leadership to keep the buildings open. And then there have been others on the other side of it who have completely agreed with the lockdown and the suspension of in-person worship and have wanted it to be a good thing. And in essence, just that uniqueness, really, of, in recent times at least, having the church in the news over the issue of worship. Because if the church is going to be in the news in recent years, it's more likely to be some of our theology or our doctrine. It's not going to be, are we allowed to worship? And that's the thing. There are many people who in turn, and underneath that, should the building be closed, should the building be open, but people are either wanting to say, how can you believe in this foolishness? Why don't you just put this nonsense of faith aside? Or on the other hand, those who can acknowledge that God exists but don't follow faith, to say, well, what on earth is God up to in God allowing it? So no, I wasn't suggesting that God has brought the pandemic. That it wasn't that, but just those are some of the questions that are being tussled out in public forums and on social media and that kind of thing as a result of the issue of worship being suspended, being very much in the news in recent months.
Whatever you do, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah. Yes. And that's, I think that's certainly been the case from the perspective of the bishops, because I don't envy them their job at the best of times, but definitely not in recent months, because when they voted to say that all of us had to suspend worship, there was uproar. When they voted to say that the churches could stay open if they wanted to, and it was individual local decision, there was uproar. So, yeah.
You're damned if you do, if you don't, if you don't.
Exactly. Yeah. So I am going to now play a video similar to the one that I played last year, which is just trying to find it, another story. This one is the story of Lisa, who is a nurse who has been working through the pandemic. And again, as I said last time, as you're watching her story, I'd like to invite you to consider what words come to mind when you hear her story, in what ways her story is either similar or different to your own, and what you would take away from hearing it.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I live in the Watford area, which has been a really great place to be because my church is here. I've got lots of friends here, and my workplace is here. I started my training in 1986, which is a very long time ago now, nearly 35 years. I've been working currently in my current work setting of endoscopy for nearly 18 years. I've very much enjoyed being a nurse. I think it's very humbling and quite a privilege to be with people during such times, and hopefully I've been a helpful nurse. I think I went into nursing very much because I like being useful and helpful. I think I'm acting on the gifts that God has given me, and that having read all those parts of the Bible where they talk about your gifts, yes, it's very humbling to think that I would actually be doing what God wants me to do. I pray on the way to work. That I think really helps. It's one of the times when I do take time to spend time with God, and it's nice to be able to walk through the hospital grounds. We've got lovely trees and views, and just listening to the birds, seeing God's nature around me helps me to feel that He's with me throughout the day, and that I'm starting the day at that in the right place, if you like, with God at the centre. And although the day might take me in all sorts of directions, I'd have different kinds of conversations with people. I hope that that starts me off in the right way, that what I project, what I give or have to offer comes from a deeper well than just what I have in my own self as a human being, that I'm able to offer something from Christ. And sorry, that all sounds very big and like I'm somehow wonderful, but actually I think God is wonderful, and He's hopefully speaking to people through me. Although I'm not allowed to talk about my faith to my patients, I hope that they do see something of Christ in what I'm able to offer them during the day. Nursing and the way that I live day to day, you get used to routines and how things work. And then this last year has been so very different for everyone. Not very different in lots of ways, but also quite samey in other ways, in that as a hospital worker, we go into work, we do our shift and come home. That hasn't stopped, that hasn't changed in lots of ways, but it was odd not seeing people, not hugging people, not being close to people we know, who we love, and I missed friends and I missed church quite a lot. So when we did get the chance to go back to church after that first lockdown, I spent that first whole church session in tears, just absolutely grateful to see people in the flesh that I know and love, that I've missed so much of. Yes, it's been a very strange year for everyone, and it's very strange in an odd way. To start with, it was quite easy to not go to church and not to do all those usual things, because it was quite nice having the sunny days and doing things that we fancied doing, going for walks. But as it goes on, I'm just aware that I'm looking back on a year where I think I didn't contact friends as much to start with as I would have, because I don't have a lot of conversation, and then there's nothing that we've been able to do, no holidays to talk about, no kind of future plans, because at the moment we've all got our lives on hold to a certain extent. You can't talk about what you're going to be doing, where you're going to travel, who you're going to see, because we're not. And faith-wise, perhaps I didn't mean to put it on hold as such. I've tried to read verses, but I don't think I've been quite so close to God as I would be if I'd had that weekly prompt of church and in kind of reflection and getting me to do all the things that I would normally be thinking of or looking to God to help me with. I'd like to think I'm a faithful person and praying person, but sometimes it's very easy to get up and carry on with the routine of life, isn't it? Where have I seen God this year? The small things. It's always been the small things. It may be a song that comes to mind as I'm walking or doing housework. It may be a verse that comes to mind, and there are some that you remember, like Micah 6 verse 8, and I'm walking to work, and just how humbling those words are when they take you right back to where you should be with God and just walking humbly in his company. The things that people do when I've had people phone me or text me and say, how am I doing? Because they're concerned about me, which is just lovely. And people that I've met along the way who've influenced me, their story as such, in obviously I can't share about things that people go through in their hospital life, but people have been through quite a lot with losing relatives to coronavirus, and I guess we all know someone at least who's got a relative that's been affected by this, and how they've continued to cope and be strong throughout, knowing that they have a faith is something that's kept me strong and kept me going. So now that we're having people through, getting the vaccine, hopefully things will change, but still carrying on that day-to-day treadmill of work, eat, sleep, and I'm still hoping and waiting for this time to be back to normal, like everybody, I think, where we could just go and have a coffee and befriend people and see people who are in need of some comfort and hope.
Okay. So is there anything in particular that struck you in Lisa's story?
I can resonate with that. Nursing is a vocation, and my one regret over this pandemic, and Shirley knows it because we've talked about it, that I've been unable to give my services. I would have loved to have gone back and worked as a doctor again. All right, I'm doing the vaccinations, and that's given me a great deal of pleasure. But I would love to have been 20 or 30 years younger, where I could have gone back in and helped, because I feel in the past 50 years, God has given me this ability to help patients and people. It's not everybody that gets that. And I thoroughly enjoyed my occupation right throughout. And it was sad to finish, but it was nice to go back this last 2 or 3 weeks and give a vaccination. I can see where that girl's coming from. And she's to be applauded for what she's done. It's a vocation. It's not a job, it's a vocation. It's a calling. And it's a calling that comes from God.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anything that's particularly struck any of the rest of you?
She said on a number of occasions. Oh, sorry, John.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
No, carry on. Carry on. You're fine.
Shirley first.
She said on a number of occasions how humble she felt. And she said that with such sincerity. I felt that that really summed her up. She was
wonderful.
Thank you, Shirley. Julie?
The bit that struck me was when she said, I'm not allowed to talk to my patients about my faith. And I thought she sounded like she'd really like to in certain. She was so passionate about her faith, but then it was the way she said it. And I'm not allowed to talk to them about my faith, and that sort of stuck out a bit to me, that part, because I thought there must be certain instances, certain conversations, because we all get them, not very often, but sometimes where you think, I will put here at this was meant to happen, this conversation, it was the right time, the right place for me to speak out and to say something. But yeah, and it was when just the way she said, I'm not allowed to speak to the patients about my faith, and I thought that bit just struck me, that, and I thought she'd be the sort of person that I'd want to, if the situation came up where she could.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it struck me though when she said it was quite easy at first to not go to church. When church was first closed, it was like, oh, it's a nice little break from having to rush around on a Sunday morning and do jobs. And yes, it was hard missing everybody, but at first it was like you were having a little holiday as such, like when you go on holiday, you're having a little break. And I think it's after those first couple of weeks then go by, you start thinking, really missing it then, and realising how important it is in your life, because it's not about the building, it's about the people. So really the church is irrelevant, the building's irrelevant, it's the people who you're thinking about. And I think that's what struck me more than anything. I'm not, the building. Yes, we love the building in such, it's homely, it's where we feel comfortable. But that's not what we've missed. What we've missed is the people.
Yeah.
Don't forget, Faith, that she's probably been working 12 hours a day under hellish conditions, and she's got home and just crashed out because they went through absolute hell those first 3 months. I mean, they're working 12-hour shifts. It must have been awful.
Yeah. And I can see her point in that sense, that of a Sunday morning. I think I think it applies basically to everyone in this conversation, that those of us who don't just show up at church on Sunday morning, but in various ways participate or volunteer, whether actually in the service or for other things through the month, but it can come a point where church starts to feel like work. Okay, a bit ironic me saying it because it is work for me, but it can at first it can feel like a break, a holiday, a novelty of just, I can sleep in on Sunday, yay! And then after that novelty wears off, that actually, I really miss it and miss the people. Personally, I was really struck by how tearful she was, talking about when that first lockdown was lifted and we were able to go back for services. Just her reaction to seeing people in person, that she was just in tears. I was really struck by that.
I think it will make us appreciate things more, I hope, afterwards. When we can get back to normal, I'd like to think we do treasure things more and treasure the things that are important to us. I think I will make more of an effort to just stop and take stock of what's important, and not take things for granted, I think.
I think it's brought the best out in some people and it's brought the worst out in other people. Fortunately, it's a very small minority, but you see cases of people who are quite horrid, like spitting at nurses and assaulting police, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of goodwill has come out of this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
an awful lot. And people who you wouldn't think would help have helped.
A lot of community
goodwill out of people.
A lot of community spirit.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
We just hope that this is going to continue, that people will realise, what they've done, and think, well, it was good doing it. People have appreciated it, and carry on doing it.
Yeah.
What about you, Jen? Was there anything in particular that struck you?
Well, strangely enough, it was the same bit that you picked out on.
Oh, sorry. Did I steal your thunder?
So it was quite, that she was very emotional being able to go back into church, and it was a big thing. Well, it was for me anyway, and it was just, I felt loved and cuddled. Do you know what I mean? It was, I don't know, it was a good blanket to have around you for, to be able to go. Nice.
The thing you missed when you went the first time was the fact that you couldn't hug people and hold people. That was I think that was quite emotional. You felt this overwhelming feeling that you wanted to, and you knew you couldn't.
Yeah.
You couldn't, me.
I can cuddle you, well, I can cuddle you anytime.
Yeah, that's cheating.
I don't know how Jan and Faith felt, but I wanted to sing.
I know.
It was hard, wasn't it?
It was hard not to sing.
Surely I'm glad I couldn't sing because I got the most horrible voice. That was a bonus for Shirley.
I think
I've really missed the singing. Really missed the singing, because that's
you find yourself as soon as the music starts wanting to join in, don't you? You know,
because for me that's when I feel closest to God, is when I'm singing or worshipping. And listening to music is so powerful in a lot of ways to bring your emotion, to focus you. And I've always felt closer to God when I'm listening to music or singing, and I've really struggled with that, I think.
We sing in school now, but we're all, I don't know what it'll be like from next week and if the rules will change, but because it's like only a few people and they're all facing the same direction, the doors are open and the windows are up and we can sing in school now. So we couldn't at the beginning, we couldn't last year, but we have been able to. So
I think that's certainly one of the things that I think the two things that I can say I've missed the most about in-person church have been singing and then have been communion. Because, quite obviously, because I'm recording the services, I'm still saying the liturgy and all that kind of stuff. But, even when, because the times that I was doing communion were when the Archdeacon reminded me that I was supposed to be. And it just didn't feel the same, standing there in an empty church and doing it for, my camera out here like this. It wasn't, I was doing it because I had to, but it wasn't the same. And I think those are the two things that I really miss about in-person church. The singing and being able to show.
I'll tell you what I did. I had a little cracker and I had a little cup of blackcurrant juice as well. Good. So I joined in with you.
Good.
Good idea.
Well, I know.
Good idea, Jan.
I mean, in all honesty, that's probably one of the things that's provoked the most debate in the church, because in normal times, as priests, we're not supposed to celebrate the Eucharist unless there's a minimum of one other person there with us. It's all about whether it's considered to be fit and proper and that kind of thing. And obviously in this circumstance we couldn't. And then there were other people saying, okay, well, if the priest is actually doing it and we're watching the priest on screen, why can't we have it at home? And then there were people saying, yes, but if the priest hasn't actually been there to consecrate it, then you can't have your own at home because it's not the same. There's just been so many conversations about it. And I know that there are some ministers who have said exactly that to their congregation. Look, have some grape juice at home, have a cracker, just trust that God knows what God is doing. Where others have flatly said, no, we have to follow the rules. And
it makes me laugh how we people think we're in control and in charge of it when actually we're not. And who made these rules? God didn't make the rules. We did. And until churches realise that, they're just banging their heads on a big wall, because they're so foolish, because they're putting barriers between God and the people, because God's in charge, not all the rules and regulations. God didn't make those.
It's like those memes that circulate on Facebook of Jesus preaching to the crowd, and in the
Yeah.
bubble it says, and you must have church wardens, 2 is best.
we overcomplicate everything.
Yeah.
And when Jesus came, he did everything so simply, and that's what we miss sometimes.
And
our minds are too sophisticated.
Yeah.
Good.
And in many ways, I mean, I also have to acknowledge on the other side that having grown up in churches that didn't have those rules, that the problem is that in certain instances you end up having people then abusing it. And for all of the people who are faithful and honorable and everything else, all it takes is one person with power who can lead so many people astray and really damage their faith, that in some respects and in certain situations, then I think the rules are a very good thing, just because they're more likely to prevent that. But yes, I can also see that in situations like this, which, okay, yes, other than the Spanish flu, but, in living memory, that are unprecedented, there should have been an element of, well, these are unprecedented times, so let's address the unprecedented nature of it, and think outside the box and that kind of thing. But
yeah,
it's a difficult one and a controversial one, certainly.
I think it rests with your own conscience.
Yeah.
I can't see any harm if you're doing the sacrament and we're at home and whatever, a drink of water. I won't say malt whiskey, that's I won't be able to say. But
dear Jesus, bless this single malt.
I'm just wondering what time.
See any harm. Nobody's at the end of the day. Nobody's going to know, are they? They're not going to send the police around.
Well, they are now.
Can I just ask? What time of day you're watching the service, Michael, when you're having your single malt?
I've had this. I don't think I've had one this year. I think I had about 2 drinks of whiskey last year.
We had one on New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve, and didn't it taste lovely? No water, man. It's got to be without water.
So that leads me very well into the final questions that I'd like to put to you tonight, and I'd be interested to see what your responses are. It can be in light of the pandemic and current circumstances, or it could be generally. It's up to you. But what do you think the role of the church in society can be? What do you need from the church that you are perhaps not getting? And what can you give that you may not be giving? So you are welcome to answer any, some, all, none of those, but I'd be interested if there's anything that springs to mind.
What was the first one?
What can the role of the church be? What do you need from it that you're not getting? What can you give that you're not giving?
I think the role of the church is to become, in communities like ours, I think the church needs to become more like a community centre, where, there's been a lot of talk of where churches have been the hospitals and the food banks, and that's what I think that's what we need in our community, something like that. I know we've got, as a few churches do different things, but I don't know. I think there's a lot more that churches could be doing for this area, I think. I don't know what else.
It's getting people into the church.
Yeah, it's getting people into the church to feel comfortable in church, to trust the people, to feel safe, to feel loved. It's breaking down those barriers that I think we struggle, especially in these areas that you're really fighting against these barriers all the time that people just, they're not brought up to go to church. Most people have never been in a church, don't know what's expected of them. They don't know what, they don't feel comfortable, and it's making that transition so that you can invite people to feel comfortable without feeling that they're coming to be preached at, or that it needs to be that first step first to feel loved, and then the rest will happen naturally. You've got to start off with that love first. That's just how I think.
I feel if we could get people in on a social way, first of all, if you could, if they've not been in church, as you say, and they don't know what to expect, if we did more social things, and then once they feel comfortable, then you can develop that, and they'll do it if they feel more comfortable in the situation. I think comfortable with people.
Yeah, the thing that we struggle with with the churches in our area, none of the churches have a lot of people. So to do jobs and to do the things,
it's always the same people.
So to me, that we need to be working together more and doing things together so that there is people to do it.
The thing that struck me about both your conversations was for them to come in. And it shouldn't be that. We should be going
out, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what you could do to go out and do it, but
like you say, it's that finding that connection, that love and that connection, and finding that need where it is.
Yeah.
Whether it's like you say, going out to the people, having a service for whatever, or I don't know.
I mean, the Christindle and the Carol service, because it was outside,
people came.
It brought the people down Brook Street into us, didn't it? As such, we went out and they came in.
Yeah.
I think, in fairness, on that specific issue, I think in many ways even aside from any other factor, I think the design of the building doesn't help, in the sense that because the door is up here, from Brook Street, you've got to walk all the way up to the driveway to what feels like the back of the church. And for those people who aren't familiar with the church building, or it doesn't come naturally, if you go to, for example, one of the great cathedrals and you see these massive doors everywhere that are wide open, I do think it's a different sense to a parish church like ours, for which you've almost got to find the door, but before you even decide whether you're going to go through it or not. But just that, I think in that sense, the design of the building itself doesn't necessarily help us.
Yeah, I think, like Jan's saying, buildings can become barriers, can't they? So that's why very often it works better if you're going out. We're told to go out, aren't we, to the people as well as being there as a church. It's finding that both into it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a conversation every congregation will have, and every church will be having, because everybody's very much a lot the same in a lot of senses. A lot of communities the same. A lot of churches, congregations are small and
elderly
people who've done the jobs for years, and they want to pass it on to other people.
Yeah.
It's hard, and
our place isn't a good place, is it? Because if you say you go to Christchurch, Moor Green,
I don't know where it is.
The number of people who say, where is it? They're just, people who live in the area don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that says something about how the neighborhood has changed over the years. Because
It certainly has.
when the church was originally built, obviously this was all housing for the folk who were working in the factories and that kind of thing, and it was next door to where they all lived. But it's now a majority of student housing. So if you ask people where the Mould Green Church is, most people will say the URC, because it's on the Wakefield Road, it's visible, they can see the cross, and they assume, oh, well, it's that one, isn't it? You know, no, we're the one round the corner buried in the estate. You know, it's.
I think because of we found this for many years, really, because of the amount of student housing and the student population. It has changed the demographic of the people around our church because of the university. Most of those properties are only let so many months of the year. So very often we've had students who come to it. They'll come obviously like 3 years on and off, and then they leave, or they get a job on a weekend because they need to work to support themselves, so then they can't come to church. You know, so it makes it very difficult to build that community when a lot of the houses are empty a lot of the year.
Yeah.
Well, when I came to Moor Green, I came in 1959, and Jan was little then. But Jan will remember the sort of people who lived in Brook Street, and they were all people, a lot of professional people lived in Brook Street, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, yeah.
And they were all, you know, people who would come to church. Well, most of them came to church.
Yeah, most of the people who lived down Brook Street came to church.
Were good supporters of the church. And over the years, it sort of deteriorated slightly. But for me, going to live in Wakefield and coming back to live in Huddersfield, I couldn't believe how Brook Street had changed in those years.
Yeah.
It's totally a different
it's a different
population.
area. Yeah.
A totally different area.
Yeah.
And I think this is a lot of the problem we have, because the people just aren't there anymore. Half the time, as you say, people aren't living there.
Yeah. On the basis of that discussion, I don't know how many of you will be familiar with this, but I'm just going to share my screen to show you this.
Oh, I saw that online, yeah.
Saz was sent that photo this week, and of when the chancel was built and dedicated.
When the new chancel.
You're down there, Shirley.
Cheeky.
Yeah, and just, you know, it's certainly the case with any church, without a shadow of a doubt. But, you know, just seeing the difference between how these places are now and how they were then. It's very, very different. Definitely. Yeah.
It's not just churches, it's every organisation. U3A, Freemasonry, Probus. Numbers are dropping. It's all the older people staying. Young people that want to go to the Keep Fit centres and do the shopping. And really, it's an insoluble position at the moment. But I'm always convinced that what goes round comes round, because 200 years ago, the churches were not well attended at all. And then in the Victorian times, they started to build up again. Yeah. And I'm sure the time will come when people start coming back. I don't know when, but I'm convinced that, as I say, what goes round comes round. Yeah.
Some of you, I don't know, may know of the church as it was, but that's the other photo I've got of that's what Christchurch used to be like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, I will stop the trip down memory lane now. But I thought that was interesting to see. Okay, it is virtually 9 o'clock, so I'm sure there are plenty of other things that we could discuss, but we have been going for a while. So is there anything else anyone is particularly burning that you really, really need to say tonight? Because if so, by all means, say it. Now's your chance. And otherwise, I will close in prayer. Okay, let's pray. God of all things, hold us as we doubt, know us as we thrive, encourage us as we move, and keep us safe this night and always. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.